Hi guys, welcome back to the second part of lesson number 2 in the Fusion for Production series about VFX compositing within Fusion. My name is Helge Maus from pixeltrain. I assume that you watched the first part of lesson 2 where we first talked about the paid and the free version of Resolve, how to get Fusion Studio running, and also the introduction to Fusion concepts inside of Fusion Studio. In this second part now, I want to talk with you about Fusion inside of DaVinci Resolve, the free version and also the paid one. I want to start here directly on this project window here inside of DaVinci Resolve 17. I started the free version so that you get exactly what you maybe have if you are now starting with a compositing project inside of Resolve. And what I can do is I can start directly here with the untitled project, or I can click here new project, which gives me the chance to name the whole thing. So let's say this is tutorial and I create now a new project. And if you have never worked in DaVinci Resolve, this is a short overview over the user interface. The thing is that DaVinci Resolve is a complete workflow. It's not about one tool. You can do editing here. You can make fusion compositions here. That's the reason why we have this tutorial series. But you have a Hollywood standard grade environment, which is named the color page here. And you also have an audio post-production area, which is Fairlight, which is here. So there are different steps in working inside of Resolve. And the first thing normally is that we start here in the media page, because here we can start adding media really convenient to our project. We can sync audio and things like that. It's also possible later in the edit or even in the Fusion page, but this is the dedicated space here. You have seen that I switch here my spaces. Maybe your bar is a little bit higher here. What you can do is with the right mouse button click, you can save a little bit of space by deactivating the icons with labels, and I say only show icons only. Really often when I later work, I deactivate this bar completely. This is something you can do here under workspace. You see here's the show page navigation bar. If you deactivate that, you get even more space and you can switch between the spaces with keyboard shortcuts. So Shift 1, Shift 4, Shift 5, and so on. And you can find the keyboard shortcuts for that here under Show Pages here, which pages you have, and Switch to Page here are the keyboard shortcuts. So if you know that you always want to work only in the media page and in the Fusion page, Shift 2 and Shift 5 are the keyboard shortcuts where you can switch around here, for example. So I switch now the page navigation back so that you know where we are working now. What you also now can do here is we can now import a little bit of stuff. That's the reason why we are here under the media page. So I go here in my mappings, and you can add here mappings by right-clicking add new location. So where is your footage? And you can do that. And here are the data folders which we used before when we used it in Fusion Studio. You can have here different views to the whole thing, and we also can search here for stuff. And what we want to do, and that's the same thing like before, we want to do the same comp we done in Fusion Studio. So we had video here. I can drag the video alone, but I also can drag a whole folder here into my media pool. And an interesting question comes, and you remember that we talked in Fusion Studio about project sizes, frame rates, color depth, and things like that. Here it's a little bit different. You work in this environment. So the first time I now bring a video into this project here, it asks me if it should change the frame rate. That's interesting. So let's go out of the whole thing. I'll deactivate this footage again by deleting it here from the media pool. Which settings do we have in our project? So the settings for our project are found here under this cogwheel. So if you click here, you see these are the project settings for our project tutorial, and under the master settings you have here the timeline resolution and also the frame rate. And you see this is a frame rate which I don't want. So if you track your first video into your media pool, Resolve asks you, should I change the settings for you for the frame rate? If you say yes and you have a 30 frames video, it changes that. but not the resolution and so on. So this is maybe something you want to take a look into before you do something. And now I go out here and do the same thing again. So I drag the video here, I say change, and now you see that now this timeline standard setting has changed to 30 frames. That doesn't mean that you can't have timelines with different frame rates, but this is the project setting you have with the resolution and so on. So this is now our video. You can see it here in the monitor. You can scrub over it. You have here some tabs which are interesting. For example, the metadata, where you can read a little bit about your footage. You have your inspector and so on. These are all things which are maybe interesting if you work in Resolve. What I do now here, right mouse button click on this master here, is I make a new bin here and say I want to have a bin with the name video. Drag and drop this thing here in. And we also had the logos, you remember. So what we can do is we can also drag the logos here into the whole thing. Let's make here really fast a logo folder. There are different ways of doing that. We also can make directly folders here, but I think that's enough. And yeah, we also had audio. I think, yes, let's drag the audio here. You see now the preview has changed and you can play here the audio if you like. If you are here now on this here, you see the audio plays and you can see it exactly here. Let's make a folder for the audio also. Okay, this is audio. Now we have all the stuff together which we had before, and now it's time to say I want to have a FusionComp. There are different ways of making now FusionComps. We can make FusionComps on the timeline, we can have dedicated Fusion clips, and also we can have Fusion Compositing clips. So let's go through all of them and their up and downsides. Let's start in the timeline here. So inside of the timeline, I can open my media pool again. And you remember that we had project settings. So that means if we now have a timeline here, it's generated with these settings. Let's make a connection to our video. You can now drag the video here into the timeline. And now we can play the video here. You see, okay, that's editing like you're normally working with. And I name that here now this timeline example number 1. If you want, you can now drag out the timelines here to the master so that you have a little bit of a structure here. That's something I like a lot. Now, Resolve has a full integrated workflow. So if you are a video editor, you make now here your edits, you have all the editing tools and so on. And then suddenly you see, okay, I need now a compositing application because I want to paint out here something, or you want to clone something here, or you want to add an object into that and so on. And this is the same workflow like Resolve uses for color correction, for example. So if you normally have your edit, you go into the color correction, you can see then here all the clips, and then you start correcting your clips here. First, you bring all to the same level, and then you make your creative grades or whatever you do. So these changes, which you do here, for example, in the color page or in the Fusion page, are then added to a clip. So this is a clip-based approach. And the clip which is active is automatically the clip where your playhead stands and which is on the top. So we only have one clip, so this clip here is now automatically the active one. So what you can do now to make a Fusion comp here is you can switch over to the Fusion page. And please look here, we don't have any icons at the moment here on the strip. If your strip looks different, there's an icon for that here. You can tell now here how the strip should look. What I've activated here for you is I have a starting and an end image here, but the rest here is free. So this is something you can do here. Also, the height of the track is made here. If you want to have different layouts here for the sound and things like that. Okay. You also can grab here these elements if you like. Make them bigger or smaller. But let's take a look here on the clip. We have no icon here. And in the moment you now go here to the Fusion page, you will see that we don't have to do a new composition here. This is automatically a composition. if we have seen the first part of our tutorial, you now see, okay, this looks exactly like the studio version. We have our two viewers here. We have nearly the same icons. Some are missing, and this is really a bummer, and I hope that Blackmagic Design will hopefully add these icons. For example, the auto proxy and the motion flow settings, and these things are not here. You reach them by right mouse button click on this icon, but this is something you have to know. So that's the reason why I showed you first the studio version, so that you know that there should be these options. They are there, but only under the right mouse button. You see it here. What's also sometimes a little bit annoying is that you have to go here into this menu here a lot, and many things which you are normally expecting at other areas here, you find here. So the square pixels here are there, everything is there, but it's only a little bit different. So now you know, and now it's not so complicated anymore, right? Now let's take a further look. We have here our toolbar, which is not exactly the toolbar you see, because you see I have here a loader and a saver. And the reason for this is I've forgotten to switch it to the default before I captured. So we can adjust our toolbars. You still can use loaders and savers inside of Resolve. You can add them here to your toolbar, make a right mouse button click here, customize your toolbar, create a new toolbar. Then you make a tool here in the flow and you can drag and drop it here into that. There are many tutorials about that, or if you have any questions, ask me. So that's the reason why I have loader and savers here. But here now in this area, we have now something new. You see, we have a comp here. We have a media in, which is quite important. You will see that, and a media out. And you remember, we are at the moment on a clip on the timeline. That means if we now go back here to our timeline, you suddenly see, I've worked in the node graph, that's the thing, that we have now here 3 stars, which means on this clip is now a fusion effect. And this fusion effect is only sitting on this clip. So if you add now again Snow Bridge, you will see that you don't have the effect here. And you can have here now an absolutely different fusion effect or color effect or whatever you do. So these two are stored on the clips as effects. That's the first thing you have always to keep in mind. So at our starting point, we now make a fusion comp on this here. And to have a connection to the timeline, we use this media in and media out. We will talk about these later a little bit more, but this media in here is sitting on Snowbridge, and it refers to layer 0. You will later see that we can have more than one layer here. And you also can take audio into the whole thing. So if you go here to audio, you will see that we have now the audio from this timeline. And we can say, okay, show me the Snowbridge audio, which is not so useful at the moment, but keep that in mind. Audio is now here connected to your timeline. And you can see the audio in the keyframes. So if you activate that, that's possible. You see it here. And that's quite convenient in working for motion graphics and things like that. So you can work first with the audio in the timeline, and then you bring it over, and then you have a timing for your motion graphics. The media out is much simpler. There's nothing. It's only an index, and that's it. But everything which you want to output to your timeline has to go through a media out. But it doesn't mean that you can't comp now without thinking about media out. Yeah, you can destroy that, take a saver, make here a comp, and you save it out with the saver, like I've showed you in the first part of the lesson in Fusion Studio. It's absolutely okay. It works. But the integrated workflow means that you make a media out here. So let's make one viewer now here full screen. And now is the question, how many frames do I have? We are now in an integrated environment, which means that the length of our Fusion comp is in this workflow here with this approach exactly the length of the clip. And this is something you can change because it's sitting on the clip. So, and that's exactly here. You still have here, if you like, your ranges for showing only a part of the whole thing and so on, but you don't have an option here to change that here now automatically to something else. It's only a preview. You output the whole thing. That's really important to keep in mind. Okay, then we comped a little bit, so let's do the same here. I take a text tool. I set my viewer first here to MediaIn 1 here, or you can flick this thing here in. Then I flick a text here into that. You see the same way of working. And I normally want to have my background here from the left. It's the brownish arrow. The foreground is greenish, and it comes in my world here now from the top. And then I can select the text, and now we see this is Resolve or Fusion in Resolve. Okay. So same thing like before, we can now move it around, and then we had two logos here, and this time we can go here to the media pool because we managed our media here. We can now drag and drop it in. If you now see that something is missing and you want to import something, you can make a right mouse button click here. There's import bin, it's import media, and you also can use the keyboard shortcut Control-I like import. So you can add directly here, so you don't need to go to the media page if you don't like. Let's now take the Resolve logo. I bring it in, also the Fusion logo, and now you see that these are also coming in as MediaIn. But the interesting thing now is they are different. If you look to this MediaIn, you remember this is a connection to the timeline. You see that you have here the audio, you have here the layer number, but nothing here. These two were not on the timeline yet. So these are added inside of the Fusion page. And so these two MediaIns have no layer at the moment because there's no layer connection, but they have a reference to the media folder. And this is the difference here. And you see you have different settings, but these settings are much closer to the loader node, which you know from Fusion Studio. You have your global in and out and things like that. Okay, now we can rename these by selecting and pressing F2, or you can make a right mouse button click here, rename, or you can go here, right mouse button, and say rename. And I think this here was Resolve logo. And if you want to have here a gap, you have to make an underscore because otherwise it's removed. And this here, let's make F2 here, is now the Fusion logo. Okay. And now I can use the same trick, output here to the output here, and we get a merge, output here to output here, we get a merge. And if we flick that in here now, we have here in this here, in this merge, the Fusion logo. And in this merge here, we have our Resolve logo. Here we are. And then we can place these two guys here. I hope no motion designer will now getting frustrated about my aligning or so. It's only a demonstration here. Okay, now we have done the same thing like we've done before in the studio, but this time we don't use a saver because we are an integrated environment. That means if we now say that's great, we have done our work, we can go back to our editing page and you now see that we get this result and we can do now all the stuff we normally do on the editing page. But look at that. You see that we had a red area and now it's filling up. Instead of writing out this comp with a saver, the editing page is caching now this clip effects. The same like on the color page. That means after 5 seconds, this is a setting you can set in your preferences of your Resolve. After 5 seconds doing nothing, it starts to cache now this timeline part to make everything here fluent again. And this is really cool. Now you can see your comp and you still can go back here into that without rewriting it because the rewriting is done at the end then here through the deliver page. You're really flexible. It caches here directly and you can see everything in context. So if you place now stuff before that, after that, and so on. So this integrated workflow makes absolutely sense for video editing and effects, which you do at the same time. Like I said, paint work, sky replacements, text animation, if you like, whatever you want to do. So this is the way of working with Fusion effects on a timeline clip. But there's more behind that. So let's go back here and make a new timeline. And this time I show you something new. We started with a timeline where we dragged video footage into that and then we made our fusion effect. What you also can do is you can create, if you select a video here, for example, with the right mouse button, you can create a timeline using the selected clip. This is a way of working. Then you can say this is example number 2. You can say I want to have this mono. And now normally it takes the project settings we set before. But what if you now need a different setting? For example, this footage has a different resolution. It's an image, for example, and you now want to work with a still image in Fusion, whatever you want to do. Then you can go here to the project settings and untick that. And here you see now you can change, if you like, the format here. And this is then only for this timeline. So this is important because if you then in the Fusion page add, for example, a source node like a background node or something like that, which takes a resolution, it always takes the resolution of the timeline you're in. So it's different. As an example, you can go in here and say, I have here something else, or you go here to custom and you are free to do that. I don't do that here now, but keep in mind you can change the format if you like, okay? And now we say this here is example number 2. Same thing like before. Now, let's throw the timeline over here. What I now do is I go this time to the logos here and I place the logos inside of the edit. So let's take our Resolve logo, place it here. Let's say after some seconds, here it is. Now I do something which I do sometimes for my work before I comp. Resolve has really great tools working here in the edit area. So you see here you have transforms, crops, you can comp a little bit, you have lens correction, things like that, and you also can animate. And this is an example I want to show you here. I go here now to the beginning of this Resolve logo, and now I make an animation of that, because that's like a slap comp in composition. You show your client, I hope that at this point something like this happens. In the moment it only fades to the back, but later after you have done your magic, your motion graphics in the Fusion page, this is really spectacular with particles and things like that, but I want to show something. So I go here to zoom and I set here now a keyframe for the size of this thingy here. I go here to the back, go 1 frame to the left with the arrow keys. You can now do it here numerically, or you can go here and you see here are tools which are overlays here of the viewer. And if you go here to transform, you have the transform settings here, the cropping settings here, and so on. You see these areas are fitting here, the inspector. So I can now say transform and I scale this guy down and you see that's the thing going on here. So now we have an animation going here and we have 2 clips. And now comes the problem. I told you in the first step that the whole thing is like an effect sitting on the clip. But what if you have now a comp made here an edit, pre-comp, let's say it like that, or pre-edit, and now you want to use this data here in Fusion. This is a problem now, because I said the Fusion effect is always placed where the playhead is on the first clip it finds from the top. So if you go now here and go to the Fusion page, you only see the bridge, because now the effect is sitting here. If you go here to this area and you say, yeah, I see both things, but the first clip which it's finding is here the Resolve logo, you will see that you now suddenly only have the logo, but not the clip in the background. Okay, this seems to be a problem, but the cool thing is, I deactivate that here again by clicking. The cool thing is that the edit page of Resolve has the concept that you make a pre-comp. If you come from After Effects, you know what I'm talking about. So you bring stuff together to a compound clip. So you bring all the stuff together and it behaves from the outside like a clip, like one clip, but inside there are many more clips. And this is doable also here. So I open you the media pool to show it to you. What you can do now is you can select now here the stuff you want to have together. And then you can make a right mouse button click. And here you can make a compound clip, which is for editing, but we want to make a compound clip which is specially made for Fusion. So it makes a compound clip in the background. You will see that in the logo. It adds the MediaIns for you. So and this is named a new Fusion clip. And now you see, this here is the icon of a compound clip. And you see also here, this is the icon of a compound clip. But it's named a Fusion clip. Why? Because you see here your little stars. This is prepared for Fusion. Let's name this thingy here. This is our Fusion clip. And we can make a new folder if you like. New bin, Fusion stuff, and place it then here. But under the hood, it's really a compound clip. You see it here, and we will dive into that in a moment. So let's go over to the Fusion page, and now you see something has changed here. You now see that we have two MediaIns, which are in the wrong order. You remember brown is the ground and green is the grass, which is in front of the ground. So that's a good hint to know what is foreground, what is background. And now you see MediaIn 1 is our bridge. You can name it if you like, so that you know what you are working with. And Media 2, like you've expected, is the logo. Okay. And we have now a pre-comp here, which is really cool. So Fusion Composite for you so that you get exactly what you need. But now comes the point. I've animated the whole thing. What's going on here now? You will see that on none of these nodes there's a keyframe symbol, which is the symbol in Fusion that there are keyframes on these. You see nothing here at all. You also see if I open keyframes and I select here the nodes, you will see these are the in and outs, but you don't see anything which is here keyed, no keyframe at all. So if you now play the whole thing here, you will see it's caching, caching, caching. Like always, it's Fusion, but the animation is there. So what happens now here? In this MediaIn, we this time address not layer 0, which we had before. You remember the bridge had a layer, and it addresses layer 0, which was the first layer. This MediaIn here addresses now the layer number 1. And the result of layer number 1 with the effect which we made, transform, zoom, animation, is now delivered into Fusion. So you get the result of your pre-comp. And this can be something which you like because you took much work on the edit page with that and all these settings. But sometimes you don't want to have that because it was only a pre-preparation. So how to do that now? We have these two MediaIns, and you remember the layer names here. 0 for the first one, or the base background, and 1 for the first layer over that. What we now can do is we can now go in here and remember that this here is a compound clip. So what you can do now is you can select that, right mouse button click, and if you now go to the top here, you see that we have now a new element, open in timeline. So you dive now into this compound clip with open in timeline. And now you are inside of this clip. You see it here. We are in the timeline example 2 inside of our compound clip, Fusion clip, which we have done. And here everything is open again. So you see here, this is the logo with the animation which we had. And here's the animation and so on. And what we also can do now is we do two things. I first select this here. And I get rid of my animation at all. I reset this here. Now this logo is standing still. But I also decided that I want to have a second logo. So let's go here to logo and say I also want to have the Fusion logo on a new layer. Now we have the layer 0, which is video 1, the background, layer 1 and layer 2. And now we go out of this clip by clicking a double click here on example 2. Now we are out here, and then we can go to the Fusion page again. Now you see that the Fusion page hasn't changed because it can be that you have a really complex comp going on here, and this would be extremely dangerous if now Fusion tries to adjust your stuff. No, it doesn't. What happened is now that the connection to logo is still intact, layer number 1, so you don't see any animation anymore because we don't have the animation on the edit page anymore. So everything is like expected. And I can go here to the merge and say, let's say I want to size it down, whatever you want. Let's make something like that and place it here. But what you also now can do is, I want to have my second logo. You can go here and drag and drop it in. We have done that before, but this time we know it's in the timeline. So what we can do now here is we can add a MediaIn node. We can go here to the effects, to the, I think it's under IO, yeah, MediaIn. But you also can do it here by the right mouse button click, add tool IO, or you can shift space with the keyboard shortcut and say, I want to have a MediaIn. MI is the shortcut for that. Here it is. And now we can add it here, like we are always doing. Here we go. And now suddenly we have a Fusion logo. Why do we have a Fusion logo here? Let's take the MediaIn and look in it. You now see that it addresses here layer 2. You can change it. If it's the wrong layer, you see every layer here is in the list and you can switch it around. But that's the way of doing it. You can change it later without any problems and bring everything over to the Fusion page and then work here with that without any problems. So that's the way this system here works. And like I've said, the output is then absolutely the same here. It comes out here. Now, I think that's good stuff, but there's one lesson more I have to teach you. And for this, we go one timeline back. Let's go into our first example, only to make it quite simple. You remember that I told you that we have a Fusion comp sitting on the clip. But I didn't tell you, because I thought it's much easier now to understand that we can have more than one comp on a clip. You always see one result, so one Fusion comp as a result. At the moment, this one here. But if you go now here to your Fusion comp again, you see this is our comp, which we've done together. But if you are now opening the clips panel, and this is something every grader knows from the color page, that we navigate with the clips back and forth between all the clips. Clips means every clip which is here on the timeline. Every clip which is here is in the clips window here in a long list. And you see here, this is the first clip. This is not MediaIn 1, this is really the clip which is in the edit. You now see on the clip that there's a fusion going on here. I think to demonstrate that better, let's take here the bridge again and place it here. Now we have two clips here on the timeline. And now you see under clips, you have 2 times this clip here. Here is no fusion, and here. You can navigate between these clips here by clicking them. You see on this clip, there's no fusion effect at all. And on this clip, there is. And if you click here around, you see that also in the edit page, the playhead jumps around. You see how great this integration is. It's really cool. On this clip here now, where we have now this node graph, you can make a right mouse button click. And now you see that on this clip, we have a composite number 1. And this is the same like in the Fusion Studio. Remember composite 1. This was the name of the composite. We can name that by going on to that, and we go here to rename, and we say this is text with logos, for example. Okay. And this is now the thing we see, text with logos. But now your client decides that he wants to change something. If you now go to create a new composition, the original composition is duplicated for you, and you can make sure that you are on the right one. You see now you are on composition 2, you can rename it, and we this time say only logos. Okay. And now we do exactly what we promised. We say we only want to see the logos here. That's it. Okay, now what is the result of that? If you go here now to the edit page, you see only the logos. And it will cache. If I wait a little bit, you will see now this comp is cached here for the timeline, and then everything is real time again. If now your client decides that he wants to change that, you can go back here and make again a right mouse button click here. And now you see you have 2 comps here. You can go back to text with logos and you click load. And that's all you do. From the database, this node tree is now loaded into that. It's the active one, and then you have this here again. And this can be extremely flexible for your work. So you can versionize your work here step by step with these comps here, and you find that always in the clips here. You also can go here and reset the whole thing. This is setting it back. You remove your stuff. So I go here first and say only the logos, and then I reset the whole thing. Yes, I reset, and then you see right mouse button click, only logos is now empty again. And we don't have a fusion effect going on at the moment, but we know in the background we still have it in the database. We have still text with logos, and we can load it up, and then we have it again. I hope this makes sense for you. Now we have seen two different ways of making FusionComps inside of Resolve. But there's another way of doing that, and this is a starting point where we don't have video footage or any footage in the background, because in both examples now, we started here with a timeline with footage in it. But what if you say, I make motion graphics, I don't have footage in the background, I really want to start from zero. Okay, let's make a right mouse button click, timeline, and this time we say create a new timeline. We name this now example number 3. We want to have this mono, and if you want, yeah, it's an empty timeline. You also can change here again if you like here the resolution. Let's do it like that. We go now to a really crazy resolution, only to demonstrate that it's possible. Okay, now we have this really strange timeline here, and now we can say, okay, we want to start in Fusion, but how to start in Fusion? There's a little trick you can do. If you have an empty timeline and you switch to the Fusion page and you start doing something here, background, you suddenly see that an automatic media out is generated. And you say, what's going on? In reality, here, Resolve now added you here a placeholder which is named a Fusion composition. And that's exactly the thing you can use as a starting point. This is one way of doing it. You have seen empty timeline, you switch over here, do something here, and it pops up and you get a media out, and then you have that here. Another way of doing that here would be, it's empty, you go here to effects, you go then into effects here. So you open the effects panel, in the toolbox, go to effects, and here is a Fusion comp. And then you can place it here. I show you that because sometimes you want to use this Fusion composition as a placeholder for a later motion graphics, for example, for a title or motion graphics, and you want to use it in your edit before it is ever done. So this is a good placeholder for that. Or you can say, I'm not so sure how long, or I have more than one shot. So this is then Fusion composition number 1, and then we have a next one, and so on. And these here can be trimmed like every other clip inside of your edit. So you really can plan out your thing. Okay, first I have an intro, then I have that, and then an outro, and so on. So you can place them here and work with them. And like before, you work then on these here with your Fusion page. So this is like a placeholder, this Fusion composition. A big advantage now is that you now don't have a video underneath it. So now you are free to tell how long your Fusion comp would be, because it's not depending on footage. So you can say, okay, I want to have, let's place here my time indicator at, for example, exactly 10 seconds. Now we have 10 seconds. And I now can trim the whole thing exactly to 10 seconds. And if you now go to Fusion, you will see, we can get rid of here the clips. You now see that we have 300 frames. If you go back here now and say, let's say, okay, we don't want to have it like that. We only want to have 5 seconds. I trim it, go here, and you have 150 frames. So that's an idea how to set the length of your Fusion comp. It's still timeline dependent because it's placed on a timeline. It's a Fusion effect on this clip thing, but that's the way you work with that. Okay, I think we don't have to do anything here. I only show you, okay, take a background, place it in here, go into the background color. You can now do something here. And you see, let's make a text, say, this is my comp, that this thingy here now is exactly doing that here. And it's now inside of this clip. And this clip here is now movable like you want to every place you maybe want to have it. Okay, this was example number 3. And now we have our last example, which is example number 4. And this is the most dangerous one. But it's really often the thing you are after if you are coming from Fusion Studio. So you come into Resolve and you only think like Fusion Studio. You say, okay, media pool is nice, I make some stuff here, that's cool, but I am not interested in timelines and fusion effects and things like that. I only want to have a Fusion comp. What I can do, I go here to the Fusion stuff, I make a right mouse button click here and say I want to have a new Fusion composition. I go here and now we tell this is my Fusion comp. I tell now the system the frame rate. I have to set my duration and then I click create. And you see the icon is really different. It's this flash symbol. Later, if you have finished your work, you can now use your Fusion comp and place it somewhere. But keep in mind that this here is now bringing all the Fusion effects to this clip here. So what we do instead of that is we don't work here. How I work with this is I go here, for example, Fusion stuff. You have done that, you can make it here, or you go directly after the media page here into the Fusion environment, open your media pool, make here a new Fusion comp like we've done here, and then you open it by double clicking here. That's the important part. You don't place it in the timeline at this point. You double click it here and then you work. And let's make that here. I show you now why this is so important. We say, okay, this here is opened directly. Okay. And if you are now ready, you have your edit or whatever you want to do, you can place it here and you see that here. Why is that now so dangerous? I show you something. I place this here a second time. I make a double click here and I change the background here now to green and I go back here into that and look at that. This is something you normally don't expect, right? It's now blue. Why is it blue? If you make a double click here, it's really green, but here inside of the timeline, when you placed it, it's blue. In the moment you place a Fusion comp, which you generated with a new Fusion composition in your timeline here, the Fusion comp from inside of that is copied into this database, which you have seen with the clips thing here. And you see in this here, it was blue. And that's it. If you now want to see this one here, the green one, you really have to go in and place it then at this point in time. You see, now it's here. The reminder is always these stars here, which tell you, okay, this here has a Fusion comp sitting on the clip. But until this point, you don't need a timeline at all at this point. If you stay then in the media page and the Fusion page here, you make your double click, you work here, everything is fine. You don't need the media out if you don't plan to place it on your timeline. You can use your saver here. Remember, we added the saver icon here by customizing our tool. And you can then directly save here everything out like we have done in the studio version. And this is the way I work sometimes. So if you have a really big thing going on, you don't place it in the timeline at all. But the timeline has its big advantages. Keep that in mind, but I think that's enough until this point. Okay, we've finished now the different ways of placing Fusion comps here and go into a Fusion comp. One thing which I want to do at the end of the tutorial is I want to go into some of the pitfalls which beginners fall into if they work inside of Resolve with Fusion. I get many questions about these, so I want to talk about this. The first one, which I hear a lot, is that people say that they can't import their EXR sequences Sometimes they say, I can't import EXR sequences because they are from Blender or so. They have problems with that. So let's talk about that, how this works and why this can be a problem. It's not important now in which example you work here. It's absolutely the same. So let's make a new timeline. And these are example 4. Again, we want to have this in mono. Now I want to have a FusionComp here. So let's go here, make a FusionComp to play with. That's it. And now we want to work here in that here. So let's go over here. And I show now different ways of working with that. The first thing is you are only working here in the Fusion page because you really want to simulate the workflow from Fusion Studio. So I make here a new bin and say these are my sequences. I go in here and now I go to import media. Inside of my folder, I find now here a sequence folder, and here is our car animation. And this is the EXR sequence. At this point now the problem begins. Sometimes, seems so, you can select here the first thing, which is the normal way which you are used to in Fusion Studio. Say open, but here you now see that you only get the first frame here. So that's not the thing you're after. So Control I again. You can select all of the numbered frames and you do that. And now you see, yes, it has worked. You see if it's a sequence, if you switch here to this list view, then you see, okay, this time it has worked. Great. Let's try another one. I go here to the sequences into the PNG and select these 4. Do the same thing again and you see, no, it doesn't work. And this is something my clients and my trainees have all the time. Why does it sometimes work? Why not? It's not Blender. It's not the problem that your numbering is wrong. The problem is that there's an automate sequence recognition going on in Resolve, which makes the problem. Let's do that here again. I delete everything here. But this time on the media pool, which is normally the way Resolve thinks at importing. I go into my sequences again, go into car animation, and you now see that in this case here, the car, I'm again in list so that you see it better. The car here is really a sequence for this system. You see here the numbering. Let's go here into the PNG folder and you now see, okay, this media page doesn't recognize here the numbering. So this is something which helps you now to understand, okay, that's the reason why the problem is here. It's not in the Fusion page, it's here. In the media page, if you go here to this little menu, there's a frame display mode, and this is normally set to auto, which means it's like the same like gather sequences in Fusion Studio. It sees, okay, there's a numbering and okay, is it a sequence or not? And you see auto doesn't do the job here. What you now can do is you can say it's always sequence. And if you do that, look at that. Now the PNG sequence is recognized as sequence. And now you can drag it into your folder here. And you see, yeah, it's now working as a sequence. Same here for the EXRs. You can drag it in and that's it. So this is one solution. You go here, switch it here, and you make sure that it works here in the media page. But the funny thing is, I delete that for you. If you switch that here in the frame display mode to sequence, and you are now in the Fusion page, open your media pool. There is not an option for that here. But if you now go to import and select all your PNGs, now they are suddenly coming in as a sequence. And the same here for the EXRs. So it's the setting from the media page, which helps you also in the media pool on the other pages, which are the edit page and the Fusion page. So this is something you have to check. Okay, next thing. I import now still. So I go here now and we go one up. And you see I have here geometry nodes EXR. And this geometry nodes EXR I place here. I connect it here, and now you see, what's going on here? This EXR here is valid. You see, it looks good. So there is something, you also see here some monkey heads, and so it looks a little bit like ambient occlusion. You also can check it here in the bigger size. You see, yeah, it's absolutely correct. But it seems that in the Fusion page, you only get a red MediaIn. This is something which you always get if you have a multi-layer, multi-channel EXR from every program, not only Blender, which has layers, and the first information which is found is not your RGBA data, your beauty. And you now have to tell the import here, the MediaIn, what you see. So if you select that here, the classic way of working with channels in Fusion, this is something I will do in the fundamentals of Fusion, is you go to the channels, and here you see all your channels which are in the deep pixel idea of Fusion. And here the first 4, red, green, blue, and alpha, are your standard beauty channels. And you can go in here, and now you see, yeah, the MediaIn has read all the channels correctly. Everything is fine. But the naming is a problem, and the first channel which it found was only RGB, no A, and somehow this MediaIn is now confused. What you then can do is you map it again. You go to View Layer Combined R, View Layer Combined B, View Layer Combined B and A, and then you see, oh yes, now we see the image and the red MediaIn is gone. Everything works fine, and then you can map all the other channels. This is ridiculous. So let's get rid of that. What you also can do, faster way, is I now take this EXR, drag it in, we get this in red again, thanks. But this time we know, okay, it's only a layer problem. If you go to your MediaIn, you see that we have also in the MediaIn, which comes from the media pool, not from the timeline, but from the media pool, also a layer. But this is the layer which is used as the default layer. So at the moment in channels here is nothing mapped. If you now go to the layer here, and you see I want to have the view layer combined as the standard layer, suddenly the image is here, because now Resolve has mapped you all the channels correctly. That's great. So that's the way you get this thingy here running. The next thing now here is, you see this looks wrong. It's too dark. Too dark is something we saw in the part 1 of our lesson, because gamma 1 images, we need, if we want to stay in our gamma 1 world, we need a view shader, or you have to bring it up. I show you both ways of doing that. If you want to let this information in gamma 1 for the whole tree here, because you want to work in linear workflow, if you want to change your viewer here, you can do the same thing like in Fusion Studio. You go here into your LUTs, and you see, nice, that Blackmagic has brought you a whole bunch of LUTs, so you can use them. But we also installed in our first lesson, also here in Resolve, the Stefan Ihringer view LUT settings. So here is Rec 709 and sRGB like in the first part, and if you switch that here, now this here looks correct. But there's also inside of Resolve here, if you go to Visual Effects IO, there's a whole bunch of LUTs which are for the visual effects world, and you can use them here, so linear to sRGB or Rec 709. So you don't need them here installed by the reactor. You can use them here if you like. Okay, that means this here is still, I can show it in the second viewer, still in gamma 1 world. But what you also can do, and this is something now which is a little bit more color management thing, what you can do is you can go to the media pool here and bring everything into the color world of your Resolve, which has its own color management. This is a big topic, but only to demonstrate that here. What you can do is you can go here onto your footage, make a right mouse button click, and here you can assign a LUT. And here you see the same LUTs, and if you go to Visual Effects IO, you know this is linear. It's a linear rendering from Blender, for example. And you say, I want to see that in Rec 709, and I want to convert it to that. You can go here and do that. And now you see This here is now correct, and we don't need here this LUTy thing again. So we deactivate that, and now this is done here through the media pool. So I hope this also helps. And the last pitfall people normally fall into, they say, okay, I have a rendering from Maya, from Houdini, from Blender. It's a multi-channel EXR. I understand now how this MediaIn works. This is great, but I don't want to use now the EXR in this kind of way, because yeah, you can go here and map now everything, and then you have a deep pixel and you can work with all the Fusion tools like that. But sometimes they say, I want to shuffle out all my channels into separate source nodes. And for this, we normally use the host script, which we also installed in our first lesson, the House of Secrets script for EXRs, and it's installed. And if you now make a right mouse button click, you normally find it here under scripts. You see, here is the host script, split EXR Ultra. And if you now click it, you will see that this script here doesn't work on MediaIns. And this is a bummer because everything is there. So how to do that? If you really want to work with a host script, you want to shuffle everything out, which you can do, by the way, also here. No one says that you can have only one MediaIn here. So you can have more than that. So if you copy, for example, this MediaIn again, now this here, and you go here to the view layers and say, I want to have the ambient occlusion, you can switch it here. It's only one click. You don't need to go through the channels, which is really ridiculous. But this here, this layer is really cool. And now you can say, okay, this MediaIn here is my AO. So it's a much faster way of working. Yeah, this is the beauty. This is AO and so on, and then you can start comping also with the MediaIns. But I know that many people from Fusion Studio are really used to work with the host script. So to do that now, you really need a loader. And I've added here a loader. You also find it here under Shift Spacebar, add a loader here or under Effects. So you can make now a loader, and then you go to your EXR, load it. And now this here is the loader itself. And now you see we are back here that the loader sees the first channels, which is AO. You don't have this really convenient layer switch here and so on, so because this is native Fusion. But you have all the Fusion ideas now. And what you can do now is you can now run your host script. So make a right mouse button click here, script, host script. Then you say, I want to shuffle everything out. Vertically, please. You have here some settings which you can play around with. You click run and close, wait for some time. And then you get all these view layers out here. One thing which you then do, you see here all the CryptoMud stuff. Normally we don't want to bring them out like that because then they don't work anymore. So get rid of these. For this, we need a new loader, or we can duplicate this loader here to use the CryptoMud directly from here. And here we have now all the other ones. You will see that I don't have source pictures here. This is something I do normally in my work. So if you make a right mouse button click here in the node graph, you see that I force source tile pictures. I've deactivated that. I like them for the mask, but not here. And if you then really want to see them for some of these passes here, for example, here for the diffuse ones, you can select them here, right mouse button click, and then you can set them here under show tile pictures. And then you have them. You have to show it in a viewer before they are generated. So I bring them step by step into the viewer with the 2 key, and now you see, now you have images here and you can start working with them. So I think this was a long tutorial here. I hope I showed really everything which you need for the start. If you have questions about these workflows, I know in the beginning you have, please write me in the comments below. I will also start a little bit with comping with you, and I will go into Resolve for that so that you get used to these workflows here a little bit more, because I want to give the beginners which only have Resolve 3 the chance to really follow along. If you have Fusion Studio on your side, you normally have now seen in the part 1 how it works. So we don't have to dive deeper into that here. One last thing which I want to point out here is we talked about paid version and free version, and I told you that the OFX plugins are part of Resolve, and you have more OFX plugins inside of the studio version of Resolve and not here. So this is something I want to show you at the end, because I think that's a really important point, why you maybe want to pay for the software, and also why I tend to use really often Resolve Studio instead of Fusion Studio. So if I'm now here inside of Fusion or the Fusion page and you go to the effects, you will see that beside of the standard tools effects, which you have here and maybe install through the reactor, which we have done in the last lesson, we also have here now a category of OFX effects. Mocha is something I've installed separately, but here these OFX effects are part of Resolve itself, of the free version. They are used in the color page, for example, or in the edit page, but you also can use them directly here now inside of the Fusion page. And that's really cool, I think, because they are quite good. You have really interesting things like glows and light rays and things like that. And that's really convenient to have them. This here is the free version of Resolve. If you have the paid version of Resolve opened, this list here is much longer. You get a whole bunch more OFX plugins which are really high end, and that's my reason why I use them here. If you have Fusion Studio now at the same time open with your dongle, you only get the paid OFX plugins. These here are really belonging to the Resolve environment. That's it for today. I hope you liked it. My name is Helge Maus from pixeltrain. Have fun. See you next time.